Imagine you walk into a clinic, meet your doctor, and during casual conversation he mentions his entire medical education costs just $800. Your first thought? Probably shock, maybe suspicion. That's exactly what happened when one person shared this story online, and what followed was a digital wildfire that exposed some uncomfortable truths about how we judge medical expertise. Not by skill, not by results, but by price tags and prejudice. That began with what seemed like harmless small talk. A patient visited a walk-in clinic, met a young Indian doctor, and during their conversation, learned something surprising. The doctor's entire medical education in India had cost approximately $800. Intrigued by this stark contrast to American medical school expenses, the patient shared this tidbit on social media. "I went to a walk-in Indian doctor. He was a young guy. He told me he went to medical school in India and that his entire education cost about $800. Interesting stuff," the post read. What the original poster likely expected was perhaps some curiosity or discussion about educational costs across different countries. What they got instead was a torrent of racist commentary that would dominate social media feeds for days. The response was swift and brutal. Comments flooded in, many dripping with suspicion and outright hostility. Some users declared they would have walked out immediately upon learning this information. That went further, comparing the $800 cost to American medical school tuition that often exceeds $300,000, and concluded without any evidence that the degree must be fake. They go straight from high school into medical school. The crime is that American law allows these poorly trained frauds to practice here in the States, one user wrote angrily. Another chimed in with personal bias. "I wouldn't let him take my blood pressure." The comments revealed a disturbing pattern. Rather than seeking to understand how medical education systems differ globally, many respondents immediately assumed that lower cost meant lower quality. Some even made sweeping generalizations about Indian medical training, calling practitioners poorly trained frauds and suggesting their credentials were purchased rather than earned. "That's how much their fake credentialing industries charge," claimed one user, while another dismissively wrote, "Translation: he paid $800 for a PDF." What these critics failed to understand, or chose to ignore, is the fundamental difference between fee structures and educational quality. In India, public medical colleges are heavily subsidized by the government, making world-class medical education accessible to students regardless of their economic background. The $800 figure represents what the student actually paid, not the true cost of their education. Independent analyses show that the government's actual investment in training each medical student at premier institutions like IMGs, All Institute of Medical Sciences, ranges between $200,000 to $250,000, comparable to American medical school costs. The difference? Indian taxpayers foot the bill, not the students. This system isn't just affordable, it's incredibly competitive. The National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, NEET UG for 2024, saw approximately 2.33 million candidates competing for just 109,170 MBBS seats across India. That's an acceptance rate of roughly 4.68%. For elite institutions like IMGs, with only about 2,207 seats available nationwide, the acceptance rate drops to approximately 0.095%, making it far more selective than Ivy League universities. Here's what the critics either didn't know or conveniently ignored. Every single doctor practicing in America, regardless of where they studied, must pass the same rigorous examinations and meet identical standards. There are no shortcuts, no discounts, and no special treatment based on the cost of your education. For international medical graduates, IMGs, the path to practicing in America is actually more challenging than for domestic graduates. They must first obtain certification from the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, ECFMG, which verifies their credentials and ensures their medical education meets American standards. Next comes the United States Medical Licensing Examination, USMLE, a grueling three-step process that tests medical knowledge and clinical skills. The statistics tell the story. In 2023, IMG first-time pass rates were 72% for Step 1 and 87% for Step 2 CK, compared to 90% and 97% respectively for U.S. and Canadian medical school graduates. These aren't easy exams. They're standardized assessments that ensure every practicing physician meets the same competency requirements. The journey doesn't end there. IMGs must then compete for residency positions in an increasingly competitive match process. In 2025, while U.S. medical school seniors matched at a rate of 93.5%, U.S. citizen IMGs matched at 67.8%, and non-U.S. citizen IMGs at 58%. Those who do match must then complete years of residency training under the same rigorous standards as their American-educated counterparts. The irony of this backlash becomes clear when you examine America's medical workforce. Roughly 23 to 25% of all active physicians in the United States are IMGs. Without international medical graduates, many American communities would struggle to access basic health care. Rural areas, inner cities, and underserved populations disproportionately rely on IMG physicians who choose to practice where others won't. The very doctors being criticized online are often the ones ensuring that health care remains accessible to all Americans. As the racist comments multiplied, Indian social media users and medical professionals began fighting back with facts. They explained the subsidized nature of Indian medical education, emphasizing that low costs don't indicate poor quality, but rather government investment in public health. India has high-quality, government-subsidized higher education. The competition is really tough to get into such colleges, as the seats are few and the people applying are many more. These are considered the best colleges and better than almost all private colleges in India, one user explained. Another added context about the broader implications. India doesn't trap its students under student debts like other countries. These responses highlighted a crucial point often lost in American healthcare discussions: that accessible, high-quality medical education is possible when governments prioritize public investment over profit. What made this controversy particularly troubling was how quickly it moved beyond questions of education costs to racist stereotyping. The comments revealed deep-seated biases about Indian professionals, with many users making broad generalizations based on limited anecdotal experiences or pure prejudice. Some shared negative personal anecdotes about Indian healthcare providers, using isolated incidents to paint an entire community of medical professionals with the same brush. Others questioned whether Indian doctors could possibly be competent given the low cost of their education, ignoring the rigorous American licensing requirements that every practicing physician must meet. The reaction also exposed American assumptions about the relationship between cost and quality in education. U.S. medical school costs have skyrocketed, with the median four-year cost reaching approximately $286,000 for public schools and $391,000 for private institutions. The median medical school debt for the class of 2024 was around $205,000. These massive costs don't necessarily translate to better doctors. They often simply mean that medical careers become accessible only to those who can afford substantial debt or come from wealthy families. The Indian model demonstrates that excellent medical training can be achieved through public investment rather than individual financial burden. This controversy reveals several uncomfortable truths about American attitudes toward healthcare, education, and immigration. First, it shows how quickly medical competency can become secondary to financial prejudice and racial bias. Second, it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how American medical licensing actually works, focusing on credentials' origins rather than the standardized requirements all practicing physicians must meet. Most importantly, it highlights the danger of judging professional competency through the lens of cost rather than results. The $800 medical degree that sparked such outrage produced a doctor qualified enough to pass American medical licensing examinations, complete residency training, and provide patient care in the U.S. healthcare system. As America grapples with physician shortages and healthcare accessibility challenges, the contribution of international medical graduates becomes even more critical. Rather than questioning their credentials based on educational costs, perhaps it's time to recognize that diverse pathways to medical excellence can strengthen, not weaken, the healthcare system. The young Indian doctor at the center of this controversy continues to practice medicine, having met every requirement the American medical system demands. His $800 degree, subsidized by Indian taxpayers and earned through intense competition, enabled him to serve American patients who needed care. In the end, this viral moment did more than expose online bias. It revealed how preconceptions about cost, quality, and origin can overshadow the fundamental question that should matter most: can this doctor provide excellent patient care? For the thousands of IMG physicians serving across America, their daily work continues to provide the answer: absolutely. The real measure of a medical degree isn't its price tag. It's the lives it helps save, the communities it serves, and the healing it enables. By that standard, the $800 degree that caused such controversy may actually be priceless. What's your take on this controversy? Have you ever judged a professional based on assumptions about their background or education costs? Or maybe you've experienced similar bias yourself. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe in calling out bias and celebrating excellence wherever it comes from, then hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, because in today's fast-moving digital world, important stories like this can get buried under the noise.